Hey, Carter.
It's gonna be a fun one, Mohammed. I don't know if you've ever sat down and told the story.
I don't think so. I don't think we've been on like a live podcast with both of us on it.
You have to go way back.
Yeah, we'll give it a couple more minutes for people to keep filing in, but I think it should be a interesting conversation as well. I don't know if I've even ever heard the full strung together story of Silk's origin. Pieces here and there.
Yeah, it definitely had some twists and turns. It's fun too because in hindsight, there was like blessing in disguise that the vision was so big because it gave us time to really think through the minutia that really could have gone wrong. So yeah, we'll have to go all the way back to really January of yeah. That's 2 years ago
Yeah,
now. That's crazy. Oh, almost 2 years ago. We're getting there.
yeah. Well, January 2021, I think, is when everything really started kicking off for us on really
Yeah.
designing, building out Silk and Shade, making sure that the economics were right, and then we would start getting a team around it as well. It's definitely a very, very fruitful journey so far.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about the other apps we were planning on building before Silk became the big one. Because that's a funny little like Easter egg. Um,
I know. I remember that, Carter. Oh, that was like a brainstorming session we had for like almost 3 months in a stretch.
yep, yep.
A
Oh,
lot of small things that came together to make Silk the well positioned stable that it is now. It's a wild story. But I think we'll wait until 11:05 here, and then we'll get going. And maybe Carter and Mo, you can kick us off with what you were doing before you met, what your crypto introduction was with it for a couple minutes, and then jump right into the genesis story of Silk.
yeah, 100%. I feel like I've given my intro to this space so many times. I feel bad for people that have to listen multiple times. So I'll keep mine pretty short today. But Mohammed, I think like feel free to speak at length about your story in space because I think it's super interesting and probably hasn't been circulated as much.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, all right, everybody, it's 11:05. Thank you all for being here for our weekly Twitter space. Reflexive stablecoins, we're calling it, the history and vision of Silk. So we'll take some time. We'll get a small intro to Carter and Mo, where they came from, where Silk came from, and the whole genesis story behind a little bit of Shade Protocol, and mostly focusing on how Silk became the extremely well positioned stablecoin that it is today. So thanks again for you guys being here. Carter, Mo, I'll pass it off to you if you guys want to kick us off on the history of Silk.
Yeah, I'll be pretty brief. I was in university in 2017. Had a pretty boring. I was leading an IT job at the university. Had a lot of extra time on my hands, and started researching all things crypto. I had a cousin link me a bunch of resources in early 2017. I pretty much just started spending all of my time obsessively researching the space at the cost of many other things. Started having all these different, I had like 60 pages of notes on crypto, and I read every single book I could find. And most of the books were terribly written. And at 60 pages of notes, I was like, I think I might be writing a book right now. So that kicked off, a three-year journey of writing, building confidence in blockchain. And in 2017, during that research, realized that blockchain was completely transparent, and I found this project known as Enigma, which was this Ethereum project trying to bring privacy to smart contracts. Read Guy Ziskin's white paper. Started watching Tor Bear videos and just got completely kind of sucked into the vision of Enigma. Joined the ambassador program, which ironically enough, me and Mohammed probably crossed paths in the ambassador program without even really knowing it way back in the day. and started contributing on the forums, gave some feedback on some of the mechanics and distribution. There's some like really old stuff out there. And then, Enigma eventually transitioned into becoming Secret Network. And it was during that transition I met Mohammed, spun up the software development company. And along the journey, I worked for the Secret Foundation, worked as the education lead for the education committee on Secret Network, and eventually was able to make the jump full time to Shade Protocol. So that's a bit of the backstory on myself.
Yeah, it's quite a journey, Carter, there as well. I remember, I think I got into crypto around the same time you did, actually, 2016, 2017. The first time was like, I think it was more on the investment side, obviously, at the beginning, because the hype for crypto was just growing on me. A lot of word of mouth around the corner, not to mention that I think the key aspect that really got me into crypto was the aspect of sending money across, like, without using a bank as an intermediary, right? Like we always have to use banks if we had to send money, but crypto was like the only space that you could send value across without anything. And that's what really sparked the interest in cryptocurrency at the beginning, late 2016, I believe. Yeah, around that time. And then I got into investment a little bit because I found this technology to be pretty useful. Obviously, there was like a bull run at that point, and then all of that stuff happened. And then I was like, no, I want to like do continue being in the crypto space despite. Once the bear came around, I was like, oh, I'll go into mining. And that's when I think the whole proof of work and proof of stake came into context for me, really. So I was just researching projects at that time, and I joined the Enigma just like you did. The Enigma group, and like basically started like meeting the Enigma. See, like pretty much the vision there Enigma was throwing was privacy on a blockchain, which was huge, and they had done some research at that point to like really back that up. So that is why I joined Enigma, and yeah, like I remember the ambassador program as well. I was part of it. I don't think we crossed paths then, or maybe we did. I don't know. I don't remember anymore on top of that. But it was pretty exciting times. I met Tor from the Secret Foundation at that point as well. When he come down to eat Waterloo, when he hosted an event here. So that was, I think, the first time I went hands-on with the blockchain community. So it was pretty exciting stuff. Really got me deep into blockchain, really. And I think that was around the time in 2019 I was really, exploring entrepreneurship since I was in university. I was just like, I'd started a previous business and I'd done that. And then I'm like, no, I want to combine my passion and like, what I like in cryptocurrency, the vision I see with actually doing actual projects. So I think that's where, like in 2020, I was like, "Yep, let's bootstrap what we are working on. Let's do this." I was gathering some experience out there as well, for working in different like dev roles around the corner, but doing like the cryptocurrency hustle. That's been running for a while. And then I think 2021 we came around. We're like, we want to like do a project that was like it's gonna be huge, and I think this is where we have landed so far. Like building out Shape Protocol, building out Silk, and the pretty cool peeps there.
Hey, awesome. Thanks, guys, for that background on yourselves there. Now I would like to direct the conversation to Silk and Shade Protocol specifically. I know both of you worked on a couple other applications or kind of ideated in that area for a bit before you landed on Silk and Shade. If you could speak to where that kind of genesis of the idea came from, that would be great.
Yeah, Mo, maybe you want to talk about Secret Bazaar, and then I can talk about the mirror. Then I can talk about the mirror protocol side of things.
Yeah, I remember that. Like, I think at the beginning when we were bootstrapping a project, we were thinking about like, bringing privacy technology forward. That was our initial vision, really, like, to bring what Secret Network had built, the technology that was used to the world, and using blockchain technology to build services on top of. So, I think our initial and first idea was really like, how do we do this like payment system, like like verified documents kind of setup. So like you have DocuSign but on a blockchain. That was an interesting idea. And then we would like, we'd make that into a bazaar where we have like different type of services on like, the blockchain provided by Secret Network. That was our initial goal, really, to build all these toolings and services on like one platform, one come shop kind of thing that we were thinking of. And that was like our initial bootstrapping idea, really. But we further did further research, talked to a lot of contributors, and we expanded our vision and the scope, and we saw that there was more to the market, and then we came across other protocols. And I think already we should talk about the mirror protocol research we did here as well.
Yeah, so yeah, Secret Bazaar was like, can we cross Secret Network with Ocean protocol? And it would essentially be like a encrypted data marketplace where people could sell data. But the more we looked into it, the more complex things became, because Secret Network really isn't designed to be a storage layer. It's really designed to be an encryption layer. And so actually, I think Jackal, ironically, really ended up being the kind of fulfilling the vision that we maybe originally had before we pivoted. And so we ended up pivoting away from the encrypted data storage side of things, primarily because of like the product market fit. Like the whole data storage side of things was still somewhat of a question mark. And I think we even like proposed a grant that was kind of like, this didn't seem like how high value enough. So from there, it was like, all right, we're going to pivot full blown to the DeFi side of things, which I'd always been a huge like DeFi fan since 2017, MakerDAO, stablecoins, et cetera, et cetera. But the vision of Shape Protocol actually started with synthetic assets before it was ever a stablecoin in many ways. We pretty much said, could we bring synthetic assets to the Secret Network? And so we started researching Mirror Protocol. And most people who've looked at our GitHub repo will actually know this. And people have actually called us out as being scammers for this, but we're not scammers. Essentially, we forked Mirror Protocol way back in the beginning. Like the repo is actually a fork of Mirror Protocol's repo. All of that code ended up getting deleted, but that artifact from the history of Shape Protocol beginning as something that was inspired by synthetic assets. And so at the time, we started looking into Mirror Protocol's product and started to realize that there was a lot of like inefficiencies with the over collateralized model. And as we, dug into this, we kind of had this idea of like, wait a second, could we use the seigniorage mechanism that Terra had been using for UST? Could we use that for synthetic assets and make a drastically more capital efficient system? In hindsight, that theory looks obviously very, very dangerous. In the moment, it felt brilliant because no one else had kind of bridged the gap there and been like, can we apply the burn mint model to assets that aren't stable coins? So Mohammed, I'll let you jump in here, but I remember like that was kind of like the initial starting point with synthetic assets that are more capital efficient by applying Terra's model to non-stable coin assets.
Yeah, so we really researched into like how to bridge that synthetic gap, really, because even to that, synthetic assets, especially that are not cryptocurrencies, have like very less, accessibility is my key part, really, because the way to maintain the synthetic assets was to collateralize positions, and at that point, it made more perspective from security, but not from a reflexive standpoint. And we wanted to redesign that. So, like Carter mentioned, we like thought about like implementing the Terra Luna model. Although it looks very lucrative at that point to us, and we really sold that vision at that early aspect of the stability mechanism that synthetic assets would bring to the table. I think we all know that there is something we have to learn and go from. So we decided to move on from even that fully reflective model and context. But again, reverting back to the history there, I think one of the things that we came around when we were building out the synthetic model at that point was how do we tie this to like a stable coin, really, right? Like we need people to have access to these synthetics. We need like an entry point, and the entry point really grew to be the stable coin Silk that we were still thinking and designing at that point. So we thought that, okay, now that we have like a concrete entry point for all of these synthetics, we can focus on the stablecoin itself, because now the stablecoin will be the entry point towards a basket of different types of pools, accesses, utilities. We were thinking about synthetic crypto indexes, which we haven't still got, which we have not thrown the idea out of the table yet, but there is definitely opportunities. But like the crypto space, especially on secret network, needed access through a privacy coin, and the only way that was access to that was through a stable coin. So we decided to build this privacy stable coin. So we did this initial design scope. We even modeled some of silk mechanisms based on Terra Luna models, just because it was so lucrative at that point, right? And it was a good competitor to us at that uh, initial setup time, I believe. But I think we did a lot of research further on that front as well. At that point, I remember we were not thinking of just copying the model altogether. I remember we brainstormed, and I think at one point we were what do we peg this currency to, since we wanted to be, a moving peg really. And then I think we came up with GYD, like a global yield derivation, which is like the basket of global currencies at that point. We thought this would be a super thing that we could move towards, and we were documenting that stuff. I had a couple of brainstorming sessions that came back to me, and it's like, Mohammed, I have something super cool. Let's look at this. And I think that's a shade white paper came out to be, right? That was super interesting aspect to how we went about
I
really
do,
building the stablecoin.
I do think it's cool too how because the entry point was synthetic assets, I think the original core contributors were much more inclined to be creative with composition, because synthetic assets by definition have all this flexibility with what they're tracking. And so because UST was this massive Cosmos stablecoin, and pretty much everyone was saying, there's no way you can compete with UST, it really forced us to differentiate ourselves from the nearest most powerful stablecoin. And so the differentiators were hey, we have privacy, and we're not going to be pegged to the dollar. We're going to have this basket of global currencies and commodities, which was inherited from the synthetics idea. And not only would we have this basket, but it would be capable of evolving over time. And then we even took it a step further, once we kind of decided on, hey, we have this vision for really unique differentiation. We then started thinking about ways that we could make Shade Protocol more sustainable than Terra, because one of the biggest criticisms that existed in the original white paper was, they have all these other apps launching on top of UST and Luna, but there's no revenue streams to Luna stakers other than UST, being minted out and Luna gets burned. That was the only kind of value accrual mechanism. I mean, there was some transaction related stuff, but it was wait a second, what if we recreated the Terra Luna model, but then every single app that gets launched on Shade Protocol, every single key DeFi primitive was able to point the revenue stream back to Shade stakers. This would create a stronger hypothetical floor value than what Terra had. And then we built on top of that idea with can we add in an additional stability mechanism with Sky Arbitrage? Can we improve on Terra's model for providing stability to the peg? And so I think it's going to be really interesting in hindsight, as historically, we would not be the project we were today if we weren't competing with this massive competitor that was a $50 billion protocol, right? This is just a bunch of group of devs all over the world and economists saying how in the world do you differentiate against someone that already has all of the adoption on paper? They've done everything right. They're the trailblazer. What does it mean to come along second and differentiate yourselves? And I think that was the greatest blessing, that we were forced to make ourselves so differentiated, because it slowed us down. It slowed us down enough that Terra ended up collapsing, and we got to rebuild the economic model. It slowed us down enough that we're seeing regulators are coming after dollar derivative stablecoins in a really big way, and suddenly Silk it's really learned not only its stability lesson, but also its legal positioning lesson. And it all started with that vision for synthetics and that vision for differentiation in a way that was more than just privacy.
Yeah, thanks, Carter, for that. Obviously, we're super uniquely positioned with Silk as it being a composite stablecoin within our ecosystem, also having it supported by revenue from all of the other applications that are built in the tech stack. Rewinding a little bit to the composite nature of the stablecoin and the regulatory status of that you mentioned, could you focus a little bit on how that uniquely positions Silk outside of other stablecoins and the lack of regulatory risk that it offers?
Yeah, so in essence, whenever what we're seeing, in 2022 and 2023 is if you peg yourself to a sovereign currency like the dollar or the euro, those governments are going to want you to exist within a regulatory framework. The first last 5-6 years of DeFi has been this wild west of innovation and discovery and building. But now it seems like the pulse of regulation is starting to be heard and be felt by these crypto projects. And because Silk isn't pegged to a sovereign currency, there's way less of an argument for it to be heavily, heavily regulated. And so because Silk has an ability to evolve its basket over time, if something like the US government came to Silk and said, hey, the dollar is attached to you, Silk governance could be like, give me 2 weeks, right? And then in 2 weeks, boom, the dollar is removed from the basket, right? And that's a level of regulatory flexibility to be able to kind of fluidly move around the composition of the stablecoin in a way that reacts to global forces that no other stablecoin has. I just simply have not seen anyone with that type of long-term basket composition governance able to evolve it. And that's going to allow us to really fluidly react in 2023, 2024, as the legal domain around sovereign peg stablecoins becomes much, much tighter. Now, this isn't a guarantee, right? These are predictions. So I very well could be wrong. But from the folks that we have talked to, we're setting ourselves up really well, which is going to be huge for us, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We've really found Shade Protocol to be uniquely positioned after reacting to a lot of outside situations that we wouldn't have predicted, but has really allowed us to evolve what Shade Protocol is, what Silk is, into something that's fitting into all of the different frameworks that are required of stablecoins and of DeFi ecosystems. So I think in the future we're at a really exciting place where we have a lot of momentum moving forward, and as we begin to launch products here, we're really going to start pushing into that new level of adoption. I wonder, Carter and Mo, if you could talk a little bit on what you see the future of Silk and Shade Protocol adoption looking like.
I'll let Mohammed take this one.
Yeah, this is like I think, Carter, we always talked about Circ in a context where we wanted to be available in our daily lives, right? Like we wanted to be able to go, have the ability that if you go to any coffee shop or, go to Starbucks, you can go ahead and just use Circ as a source of payment. And that's like our end goal vision, really, to bring Circ to really the hands of, end users, right? You don't have to really worry about the mechanisms that happen in the background. That's more for the core people. It's more for the people in the governance and the DAOs to figure out and worry about. But, out to the end user, it's more about the usability of oh, I just want to go and buy something. I should be able to do that with any stablecoin. And that's where Silk really wants to go to. So with respect to Silk, that's really, really the end goal. I would say, obviously, Silk by its nature is more of a basket. It's pegged to a basket of global currencies, so it builds global stability. So even if you don't want to really use it for a cup of coffee, you could use it as a very good hedge against global economies, right? So you are invested in Silk because you want to hold value over the long term. So that's like a very big use case. When you talk about investors, when you talk about like hedges, when you talk about a bet against inflation, so there's a lot of smaller and bigger visions where Silk could tap into. Um, just as a whole, right? But like again, the core concept comes down to like is Silk stable enough? Is the stability mechanism gonna hold strong enough? And that's what we're building towards right now. So we want to make sure it's stable, it's regulated. We're not trying to break any regulations here. As long as like the regulations are fair for the DeFi space, I think that's where we want to head towards. I think that's where the Shade DAO will also really push towards, in my opinion. I'm just one person in the Shade DAO, right? Like, yeah, even the wider Shade community might have a bigger vision, a bigger goal to where Shade DAO could really take Silk to. Where do we want? Do we want it to be integrated with governments? Do we want it to be, working alongside governments? There are many spaces Silk could apply to, and I think that's where the long-term vision of Silk really comes into.
Yeah, and on the Shade protocol side, separate from Silk, I think for me the vision has evolved a little bit over time on what I picture for that. And credit to Ranger on this front. I think that Shade protocol has the potential to be the liquidity hub for privacy preserving DeFi. And like I think that if we launched, I think like the end vision for me for Shade protocol side would be we launch every single key financial primitive, and so that anyone all over the world can privately have access to financial applications and financial instruments that they don't have access to in their normal everyday lives. But because they have an internet connection, the doors are open to this privacy preserving hub of applications. And there's no limit to how rich that offering can be, like the breadth of applications that can be built out over time. Obviously, initially, we're targeting the core financial primitives, lending, stablecoins, exchanges, options, derivatives, et cetera. But I definitely foresee, in the next 5-10 years, that we could see an explosion from 5 apps to 100 Shade protocol apps, and it's all going to depend on the adoption and the revenue that's generated and how that revenue gets re-put to use for more building. But I'm excited about on banking for the folks that don't have access to banking, and while simultaneously protecting people's sovereignty, so it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you have that privacy. So that's the other side of the coin. If Silk's one side of the coin and Shade's the other.
Yeah, thank you so much, both. Really fits into the Shade protocol vision of being widely adopted and increasing accessibility and allowing privacy to be something that is what we see it as, of being a right to DeFi users. At this point, I'm going to open it up. We've had half an hour of history and vision of Silk. If there's any questions that the community has around Silk, its peg, its composition, its history, its utility, now would be the time. You can just raise your hand here or request to speak, and I'll bring you up as a speaker one at a time if anyone's interested in asking questions. While we're waiting on that, Carter and Mo, if there's anything else you want to bring up around Shade protocol or Silk in general, feel free to talk.
I think it's just the reflection that it's as a builder, you don't get time to like slow down and think about the twists and turns, because in many ways, when you're in the middle of it, everything feels linear, right? Like you always feel like the next decision is obvious, but then you look back and there's all these zigzags in Shade Protocol's history, but those zigs and those zags are what have brought us where we are today and like really differentiate Silk. And I think there's something to be said about giving really good ideas the time to mature and be challenged. If we could have launched Silk a very, very, very simple version of Silk with, no basket, no over collateralization. We could have launched just a very simple stablecoin last year, probably in like September. If we
And
would
that
have
was
done that,
I
yeah,
remember, Curtis, that was an internal timeline that we're gonna
yep,
launch in like, go live in like end of Q4 of 2021. But
yep,
like here we are in Q3 of 2022 and it's still not live. It's like, but in retrospect, it was a good decision because we had to redesign so many things.
yep.
Not to mention, we learned from other networks, and I think the bear market is a perfect place to build, anyways.
Yeah. Well, I think that's like we're there's always this pressure for very new projects and new builders to go to market as fast as possible. And that's like that can be a healthy pressure. But in this space, it's like there's so many moving pieces and there's so much competition that if you're not building for sustainability and scalability, then just like getting out into the market doesn't get the job done. I mean, I think Terra is an example of that. They're a $50 billion protocol, first to market really on the algo side, or one of the first to market. But if you don't build with the true sustainability in mind, then it doesn't matter how big your lead is. So it's like secure systems and sustainable systems and patience are extremely powerful forces in a space that don't have any patience. And I think we kind of tripped and stumbled our way into patience, to be honest. But I'm really glad. I'm really glad it played out the way it did, and that the early parts of the journey with synthetics and the data place, all of those things kind of informed our view on privacy and on what Silk could be. So it's a cool reflection.